Pandemic, of course, has had a huge impact on the real estate market on both the residential side and the commercial side. And our next guest is one of the largest real estate developers in the country. Stephen Ross is the chairman and founder of the Related Companies, which developed Hudson Yards, a spectacular property in New York City. His $60 billion portfolio includes luxury rental and office buildings. And, of course, he is also the owner of the Miami Dolphins. And Fred Maxick is the founder and chief technology officer of Healthy, a company that Stephen has invested in. Fred, we'll get to you in a minute, but Stephen, we want to start with you on real estate. And why don't we talk a little bit about what you're finding and seeing in Hudson Yards, which is a magnificent property. But I can imagine that it is a struggling property right now. Neiman Marcus has already sort of pulled out, and I think a lot of the restaurants are basically closed. How tough has it been?
Oh, I mean, it's been tough, like you say. The retail is totally closed, and the hotel is closed down there. The office buildings are open, but, you know, today there's probably 10% of the workforce is working there. I know I just got back to New York. I spent the last 2 weeks here working at the office, and I can't tell you how thrilled I am to be back and how good it is to be back. And I really think it's so important, you know, that we do the things to open up the cities. And I think the perspective that a lot of people have when you look at New York, or I'm sure other places, is the respect that the people really have for this pandemic and how they're dealing with it. I mean, I feel totally safe coming back to the city. The protocols that we put in place in our offices here at Time Warner Center, and how people within the office, I mean, it's unusual, it's different, but people, when you go into meetings, everybody puts a mask on, they maintain their social distancing, and when you're in your office alone, you take your mask off. And all the cleaning process and protocols that we go through. But I think, right now, I think, New York is certainly suffering, as I'm sure almost every other city is, with people really being reluctant to go back to work. And that's really, the main thing. And I know how much better I feel being back here,
I'm doing a kind of, maybe kind of like you, I've sort of done a hybrid style, partly working at home, as viewers know, and partly being in the studio. And I enjoy being back among people. I mean, we are human beings, after all, and we thrive on social contact. I wonder how much thinking and modeling you have done as to how long it's going to take for things to, quote, in the big cities, the big inner cities, and of course, you're represented in Miami, you're represented in lots of cities around the country, for those big inner cities to come back to something approaching, if not 100% occupancy, something higher than the 10% you said. And how long can you sustain the revenue hit that you might have to under the reduced occupancy circumstances?
Well, I think, there's the mental aspect. I think people really want to come back to work. And I think, if they came back, they'd see it, probably a little different perspective than they probably are imagining it. Because it's incredible. You got to give people a lot of credit. They really respect the impact of this pandemic. And they're obeying, they're doing everything that I can see when I'm out on the streets, in trying to really adhere to the best policies you could have. Financially and mentally, I think people need to come back. And, the country needs to reopen. And I think, government should do what it can to really help that happen. I think in New York here, where the numbers have been probably the best in the country, they still talk about, opening the city, but they're not doing things to keep probably those numbers down that people would want to come back to New York for. Like there's no health clubs that are open, even though in New York City, whereas around the country, we have opened up. We also have a large stake in Equinox Health Clubs, which is around the country. And in most places we're open, and the results have been incredible in terms of the protocols we're finding. People, working out, even though they're using masks, but the new cases we're probably way below the national average. So, I mean, there are things you could do. And I think, we have to look to do these things
Right.
that will encourage people to come back to the city.